Hey everybody, Trey here, back with another forecast discussion today for today's threat, which looks to be the most robust of this kind of multi-day stretch of severe weather that will stretch into tomorrow as well. So first things first, we have a slight risk out for for much of the eastern half of Texas into far southeast Oklahoma. The main threat's going to center on East Texas later on this afternoon and evening as the ongoing squall line, which we'll take a look at in a second here, moves off toward the east. Marginal risk surrounding that, extending all the way back into the southern Texas Panhandle, Texas South Plains, all the way in through much of Arkansas and Louisiana for some more marginal severe weather threat around the main threat. Tornado risk is there today, 5%, centered from basically the I-35 corridor between Dallas and Austin, out to the east toward Lufkin, Nacogdoches, down even toward including the Houston, Texas area. So 5% there, surrounded by a nice 2% as well. Damaging winds also going to be one of the main threats today, with that 15% coinciding with that slight risk area. Large hail going to be a threat, but I think it's going to be much on the back burner for today. It's going to be mainly a damaging wind and embedded tornado threat with the event today. Then we go into tomorrow. We have a slight risk out for much of Mississippi into eastern or western Alabama with a coincident tornado and damaging wind threat as well. So we're going to focus on today in this video. We'll take a look at tomorrow toward the end of the video just as a little bit. This will probably be the last forecast discussion of this setup here. Tomorrow kind of, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Just going to be kind of a continuation of today's event. So I'm going to focus on today's event in this video and then touch on tomorrow's threat for the southeast at the end. So let's look at our water vapor satellite imagery as we usually do. We can pick out the troughs here. Here's our big old trough here that is making its way east into the central and southern plains today. We had our severe weather event yesterday across South Dakota, southwest Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa. That trough associated with that, you can see a little bit of spin up in here. That's kind of that northern portion of the trough we talked about, would kind of split off from the main trough here and move off toward the northeast. That is going to be the case today. This northern trough going to move off toward the north into Canada, and this main sort of trough is going to take over, moving into the southern plains later on this afternoon and evening. Visible satellite imagery right now, you can see we're shrouded in clouds right now, and you can see some bubbling in the clouds here, especially across central Oklahoma. We actually have a mesoscale discussion out right now from the SPC issued about an hour ago for an ongoing line of storms that we have. Let's take a look at the radar here. You can see what's going on. A very massive line of storms here extending all the way up from northern Oklahoma, about to impact the Oklahoma City metro areas. If you start to hear some rain and thunder here in this video, you'll know why. We actually have a tornado warning down here on the line as we speak right now, and the line extends all the way into North Texas here. Let me put the cities back on. So Bowie, Texas, under the gun for a tornado warning right now as the line extends all the way south into central Texas, even just to the east of Abilene here at the moment. We're recording this right about 8:45 a.m. right now. So this line will continue to move off toward the east. This line is not going to be the main severe threat for today. It's going to kind of reinvigorate itself later on this afternoon and evening, and that will be the main story with the severe threat today. Again, tornado warning right now for places just to the west of Bowie, Texas. Let's look at the velocity data here just kind of quickly. That doesn't look like much to me. Looks like maybe a little bit of rotation in there. But again, this main line, maybe some sporadic damaging wind gusts, maybe a little spinny on the leading edge of the line, but nothing much. But this line is going to continue off toward the east as we go throughout the day today. And we'll take a look at our 500 millibar map here. So this is our 500 millibar map. You can see the kind of piece of the trough from causing yesterday's severe event moving off toward the northeast, and our main sort of trough here centered over the desert southwest right now. That's going to move again off to the east today, and that's going to be our main player for severe weather today. Would expect a pretty strong mass response with this system, really strong response in the low levels. We'll go down to our surface map here, and you can see again why it's been so windy across the plains here is this strong surface low here centered over northeast North Dakota, moving off into Canada as we speak. The isobars very, very close together. Pressure gradient force very, very strong here. That's why it's been windy, not associated with thunderstorm winds over the past few days. But the cold front from this system extends down into the plains here, and that is what is helping to fire this initial line of storms that we're seeing this morning. Surface low development is taking place here out across eastern New Mexico, West Texas this morning. You can see the closed contour there. That should intensify a little bit and deepen just a tad and move off toward the east as we go throughout the day today, and that will help reinvigorate that line, kind of enhance the winds at the surface, strengthen those surface winds, back them a little bit, and help invigorate that line as it moves into central and east central Texas this afternoon and evening. Strong low-level jet as well, thanks to that low-level cyclone there. Broad swath of 30, 40 plus knot winds here across the upper Midwest down into the southern plains here. 40 to 45 knots here currently out of the south-southwest here across much of Texas into Oklahoma. And that should maintain itself throughout the day and then strengthen, as it usually does, toward the evening hours tonight. So decent amount of wind shear in play. As we saw yesterday, we just had some instability concerns yesterday, and that was due to a lack of moisture. Not going to be the case today, where you can see the air mass here across Texas. Very, very juicy here. Dew points in the upper 60s to even low 70s here. You can see at Gainesville 70 over 70 there. Some spotty 70s in there. So very juicy, very moist air mass there across the eastern half of Texas. So unlike yesterday, we're going to have a lot of moisture in play. Tornado threat will be higher than it was yesterday across the northern plains into the upper Midwest. You can see winds here out of the south-southeast across much of the eastern half of Texas. In the Panhandle, western Oklahoma, winds out of the northwest here. So we can see our cold front is kind of somewhere right in this region, kind of right in here. It looks like it just passed through Abilene a little bit ago. Abilene is right in there. Wichita Falls is right here, so they are behind the cold front now. And this cold front, again, is going to continue to shift off to the east slowly throughout the afternoon. And as that surface low develops and the trough moves in, that's when this cold front will really start to surge off toward the east and help push those storms off pretty rapidly toward the east. Let's take a look at some soundings here. This is the Norman, Oklahoma sounding. Interesting to note here, a pretty decent amount of low-level instability here. This is kind of interesting to note. We have some pretty strong low-level warm advection here. So large looping hodographs here in the lowest kilometer. A little bit of a loop-de-loop here, a little bit of wonkiness here in the hodograph between about 1 and 4 kilometers or so. So that may tend to keep the storm mode a little bit messier today. Again, I always tend to note that the lower that kink is in the hodograph, the more messy the storm mode tends to be. And we're right off the get-go, we have a squall line, a linear sort of storm organization today. So discrete supercells are not going to be a very strong possibility with this system. Let's go down to Dallas-Fort Worth, much of the same. A little bit less low-level instability, pretty much a tall, skinny profile here. Not much cape to speak of. Mixed layer cape at 260 joules per kilogram. That should increase throughout the day. We should get some semblance of destabilization out ahead of the line here. Maybe some patchy breaks in these clouds out ahead of the line, as well as continued low-level warm advection. Should help continue to destabilize the atmosphere throughout the day. But we shouldn't see, super amounts of instability, maybe 750 to 1,000 joules per kilogram when it's all said and done today. But same thing here, large looping hodographs in the low levels, wonkiness here in the mid levels as well. That should resolve itself somewhat as the surface low moves in, as the trough moves in. The stronger winds at 850 and 700 millibars should subside this backing a little bit. And we should maintain this large looping hodograph here throughout the day, which will make this line potentially a tornado producer. We've already seen this line, as we saw down in Texas there. Some little spin-ups along the line are possible with this squall line. So let's look at the NAM coming in as we speak here. So you can see this is the initialization here. Northern trough moving off into Canada, main trough replacing it. And you can see starts off kind of positively tilted here, tilted toward the right. That means it's positively tilted. And as we go through the day, that band of strong winds rounds the base of that trough, and by This late this afternoon and evening, much more of a vertically oriented trough, more of a neutrally or negatively tilted trough. You can see the timing here. The trough kind of lags behind a little bit by 0Z, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the band of enhanced wind just making it, or that exit region just making it into central and north central Texas. And that squall line is going to be somewhere out in this vicinity. So I think this is mostly going to be the main severe threat is going to come sunset and after for parts of east central Texas as this trough moves in. 850 millibar pattern here. You can see that low-level jet sticks around throughout the day, 30 to 35 knots or so. Then by 3Z, we got a little bit of a skip in there, but you can see very broad swath of 30 to 40, 45 knots there, mostly centered across east central to northeast Texas there. So that should be where the main tornado threat will be with that line, kind of coinciding with that 5% area we saw earlier. Surface pattern here, we'll go back. You can see that initial surface low moves off into Canada, and it is replaced by a secondary surface low down here into Texas this afternoon. Close contour there, winds nice and backed there out ahead of it. That would help enhance the tornado threat later on this afternoon and evening along that line and help reinvigorate the squall line overall. We'll zoom in here to the southern plains sector. Take a look here. So you can see where that cold front is, stretching somewhere kind of in this vicinity. And doesn't move a whole lot throughout the day. And then finally this evening, when that surface low and trough really start to move in, is when that cold front really starts to shove off toward the east. You can see it really start to surge off to the east there toward by about 10 to midnight there this evening. So let's take a sounding here. This is at 3Z. We'll take a sounding out ahead of the cold front here. Take one down here in southeast Texas. So you can see pretty solid looking profile here. Instability definitely tall and skinny. We do have a little bit of drying aloft. We can see in our water vapor imagery a little bit of dry air aloft here. Those yellow colors start to move into the region. That may introduce a little bit more instability into the atmosphere and help destabilize things just a tad more. You can see we do resolve that kink in the hodograph. Still a little bit of veer back, veer signature there, but definitely much less pronounced than it was earlier. Very strong, large looping hodographs there in the lowest levels. Strong veering winds with height. That will definitely foster a tornado threat along the line. Again, this, given the overall degree of frontal forcing, very, very strong forcing with this compact trough and cold front as it surges east. Just given the overall forcing, this should be more of a linear sort of organization to the storms. If we look at our storm mode here, let's take a look at our shear vectors with respect to the initiating boundary. This is our cold front. Shear vectors are a decent amount off of the cold front there, so we may have a small window for discrete storms here, especially along the southeastern, the southern flank of the squall line as we go. So places like, Austin, San Antonio, College Station, out toward Houston and Galveston, so anywhere in between there may see a small window for discrete storms, from sunset to about 9-10 p.m. before the squall line really, or the cold front starts to surge off to the east there and frontal forcing takes over. So wouldn't be surprised to see a discrete supercellular 2, a semi-discrete supercellular 2 before things congeal fully into a line again, especially across that 5% area, the kind of east to southeast Texas there, in that 5% area. So this is a little bit farther south, much of the same, large looping hodographs there in the low levels. So damaging winds definitely going to be a threat given the very strong winds in the lowest levels of the atmosphere being transported down to the surface, and an embedded tornado threat as well given the large looping hodographs there, favorable for some spin-ups along the line. All right, we'll take a look at some convective allowing models to round things out here. Squall line ongoing here this morning. This is the 12Z HER. Moves off toward the east, starts impacting the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area right around the lunchtime hour, 11 to 1 p.m. or so, as it continues to move off to the east. You can see that line. We will have a chance for storms here behind the cold front here from the Texas Panhandle into the Texas South Plains. These storms mostly should remain sub-severe, maybe some instances of some marginally severe hail and damaging winds out there. As we saw the marginal risk does extend back out there toward the Texas South Plains, southern Texas Panhandle for these storms, but shouldn't be too much of a significant severe threat out there. It's going to be this main line. You can see by 23Z, by 0Z, we start to get some storm activity right after sunset here along the southern flank of that line, and that squall line really starts to reinvigorate here by probably would say about 3Z, so about 10 p.m. or so and after, for parts of east central and southeast Texas. Tornado threat will increase as well as the low-level jet increases, as well as the damaging wind threat. And then by about 3 to 4 a.m., the squall line should be out of Texas into Louisiana, moving into the southeast for Tuesday. Speaking of Tuesday, again, slight risk is out for Tuesday, associated all hazards threat there as well. Let's quickly look at that. And it's just going to be a maintenance of the squall line into Tuesday. We'll just keep it here. This is the trough for Tuesday. You can see it just is going to continue to move off toward the east for Tuesday and help push that squall line along. We're not quite out far enough on the NAM, so I'm going to switch over to the 9Z wrap here. Let's see, the 12Z wrap, excuse me, that is out far enough. So let's continue here. That only goes out to 9Z as well. So we'll go to the 6Z NAM. Shouldn't be too much of a difference. You can see that the low kind of shears out a little bit, starts to maybe occlude a little bit the mid-latitude cyclone there, but still should be strong, forcing aloft, strong shear to help this line persist as it moves into the southeast. If we look at our convective allowing models, let me shift to the southeast sector here. The line will continue into the overnight hours, early morning hours Tuesday. Kind of weakens there as it moves across Louisiana and Mississippi, as it maybe instability hits a local minimum there. And then by late morning, early afternoon, that squall line starts to reinvigorate itself as it moves into eastern Mississippi, into western Alabama. Much of the same threats out there. We'll just look at the HER here real quick, just because it's going to be much of the same. Warm sector here, some juicy air out ahead of that, especially in southern Mississippi and Alabama, some 70s dew points down in there, mostly upper 60s dew points. Warm sector will get pinched off as that surface low occludes off toward the northeast. You can see that the surface low is somewhere up in here, and the cold front continues to push off and just kind of pinch the overall warm sector there with time. So severe threat should maintain itself, especially in eastern Mississippi, western Alabama through the afternoon hours, and then we should be done with this system by late Tuesday night into Wednesday. All hazards threat as well. Let's take a look at a couple of soundings here out ahead of the line. You'll see, yeah, so instability, again, going to be a little bit on the meager side here. Tall, skinny cape. It should be enough to maintain that squall line. Nice, large looping hodographs here out ahead, given that surface low moving off toward the east or northeast. And then we should see that low-level jet maintain itself as well. So lots of shear in the atmosphere. Whoops, let me go to 850 here. Yeah, so you can see that low-level jet really maintains itself as it goes through the southeast here. 50-plus knots there, actually strengthens a little bit. So we should have ample shear in place for a tornado threat along that line as it reinvigorates itself in eastern Mississippi, western Alabama later on this afternoon, or tomorrow afternoon, into the evening hours. Damaging winds going to be a threat as well. So it's going to wrap things up for today. Again, today we have a slight risk out, level 2 out of 5 here for much of the eastern half of Texas, I-35 corridor, including the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, Waco, Austin, San Antonio, and places out toward the east. I-30, I-20 corridors, Tyler, Longview, Palestine, and then down to the south, Lufkin, Nacogdoches, College Station, Bryan, places in between, and then toward the Texas Gulf Coast, Houston, Corpus Christi, Galveston, Beaumont. The farther east you are in that slight risk area, the later the threat will be for you. Just kind of a timing thing here. Once again, places like Oklahoma City about to be hammered by this line. As this video comes out, this probably will be approaching places like Nocona. Bowie is under the gun now with that tornado warning. Decatur, Azle, Weatherford, Granbury. You'll be under the gun by the time you see this video. Again, it's about 9 a.m. Central Daylight Time right now, so this line will have moved off toward the east a little bit. Again, Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, probably about 11 p.m., right about lunchtime or so, 11 p.m. to 1 for the entirety of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. Again, keep an eye out for some sporadic strong winds and maybe a spin-up tornado or two early this afternoon. We will move off to the east. After that, probably 1 to 4 p.m. for places like Paris, Mount Pleasant, Sulphur Springs. And then we should see the main threat start to initiate late this afternoon into the evening as that trough finally moves in. Places like Waco, Killeen, Austin, San Antonio, down into the hill country, Fredericksburg. And then off to the east, College Station, Houston, Beaumont, Nacogdoches, Crockett, Lufkin, Tyler, Longview, toward the Shreveport area. You will be under the gun this evening, probably after sunset, as we said, after 7 p.m. or so, anytime after that. Keep an eye out for some spin-up tornadoes along that line as the shear increases, and some damaging straight-line winds as well. And then tomorrow, again, as we saw, slight risk out as well. Main threat, I think, going to be from the eastern half of Mississippi into western Alabama as that line intensifies. Spin-up tornadoes is going to be a threat, as well as damaging winds for tomorrow as well. So it's going to do it for this video. Again, probably going to be the last forecast discussion of this little multi-day severe weather outbreak, as tomorrow looks pretty much the same as today, just a continuation into the southeast. So with that said, that'll do it. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.